What was your biggest, oh crap, my parents are gonna kill me moment? When I was just into high school, I was home alone after school before my mom got off work. My mom called me and asked me to defrost a turkey by putting it in the sink and submerging it in water. It was too big for the kitchen sink, so I took it to the big sink in the laundry room, plugged the drain, threw in the turkey, and turned on the water. It was taking a long time to fill the sink, so I sat down to watch some TV. I must have been tired, because I fell asleep. When I woke up a little later, I rushed into the laundry room to find the sink overflowing. I shut the water off and scrambled for some towels. After mopping up all the water and putting the wet towels in the dryer, I finally breathed a sigh of relief that my crisis was averted. My mom came home shortly thereafter and went into the basement to get some food for the freezer. Suddenly, all I could hear was this high-pitched, demonic screaming and cursing coming from the basement. Convinced that she had been possessed, I rushed downstairs to see what happened. When I opened the door, it's hard to describe the destruction that laid before me. Apparently I had been asleep longer than I thought, because the water had run down the vents and through the rafters. There was water leaking from the ceiling tiles, streaming down the walls, coming out of electrical outlets. I had single-handedly ruined most of the basement addition, and that was how I learned how to replace drywall. Borrowed, stole, my mom's new Corvette when I was 16, snuck out late at night, went and picked up my main squeeze at the time and was living the responsibility-free dream, until a local cop thought it was a little funny that a kid barely old enough to drive was driving around our poor Appalachian town in a $60 K vehicle. He lights me up, I pull over, assure him of course my parents know I have the vet, don't be silly, turns out, I'm a crap liar. Here's the deal, the officer said, I'm gonna follow you home and talk to your folks and, unless they insist, won't arrest you. Fair deal, except I'm 99.99% sure my mother would have had me arrested. Fortunately, my stepdad's brother lived directly across the street from us, and he was always mega cool, so in desperation, I called him. I explained the situation, told him which door I left out of and begged him to sneak into my house so he could come out looking like my pee-off dad. Went off without a hitch. He put on a heck of a show and spent a good 10 minutes talking to the officers after telling me to get in that goddamn house, boy, so I'm totally free and clear. Until about 20 minutes after I got to school on Monday, and got called to the office for a phone call. It was my mom, who sounded mega pee. She starts, so I just had an interesting conversation with your uncle. Care to explain that? I freaking folded, told her everything. I had to physically hold the school phone away from my head because she was yelling so much. She had talked to my other uncle, who just so happened to have driven past me while I was pulled over. She had no idea about the cop following us back, or my uncle sneaking into the house, or really anything beyond the fact that I was pulled over in her car until I told her. So, yeah, that was a long day at school, knowing what I had to look forward to at home. Cool uncle, at least one of them. Walk into house, go to stash spot, weed's gone, frick. In high school, my father told me the next biggest moment in his life was going to be him catching me with drugs, taking them, and getting to use them himself. Not my biggest moment, but I definitely had some explaining to do as a kid. I was in middle school one day before winter holidays. We were supposed to meet with a few friends to play card games and the likes, so I packed my things and went to school. All of a sudden, the drama teacher spontaneously decides to use our spare time for rehearsals. Me being the only kid of my group not participating in the play, I couldn't stand the teacher. She was totally nuts. Find myself literally alone in the whole class. Not even the teachers showed up. I asked for the principal to let me go home, but he informs me that not even a verbal consent of my parents would do. Tired and agitated, I walk out of his office, ready to fight this war. I sneak out of the main building, climb over the fence into the schoolyard, go through the broken wall out of the janitor's house. From then on, I walk about 10 kms, no nearby bus, and finally find myself in front of my house. Now the plan was to hide in the house until the time the bus was supposed to drop me off. Unbeknown to me, my mother came home early and saw me walking up the road. The school had also called her informing her about my absence, which was illegal or fake. I had a party of 75 plus people at my dad's house while they were on vacation. My parents didn't find out about this until it was in the paper that 11-12 kids from the school's baseball team got suspended. I was a sophomore in high school and my mom and stepdad were on vacation and I had to stay home because of school. I think they were even in Hawaii. Bastards. During metal shop that year I had made a toolbox I was going to give my stepdad for Christmas. Now that he was gone for a while I had a chance to go and paint it in the shop. Our shop was a detached garage. 3+ car size, with super high ceilings and a compressor. Outside. Relevant. My stepdad did work on cars on the side, mostly body and fender and paint related stuff. The place was not messy, it was cluttered, and had overspray on basically everything. I grab the toolbox and take it down there. After looking through his spray cans I find some red, shake it up, and get that box painted. Then the fun starts. When I take my finger off the button on the top, the paint continues to spray. Crap, it's busted. Being what I thought was pretty clever, I quickly reached down and removed the button from the top. As an aside, if you aren't familiar with aerosol cans, the paint comes through the button you depress on the top of the can. So, clever old me rips off the top thinking this will stop the paint. Nope. Instead it turns it into a red volcano. Again, my quick thinking kicks in and I run outside and set it down, deciding to just let it run its course and throw it away. Then I get back in and again, my Lex Luthor streak sees that there is red overspray everywhere. But, since the place is cluttered, I just move everything around a few inches and no longer does it look like a pattern. It's just some spray like most of the other. Perfect. I am so getting away with this. Fully convinced at the genius of my plans, I went outside and saw that the can of paint, the red volcano, had been blown over by the wind and had sprayed all of the paint inside out. About 1/5 of the compressor and a huge circle on the exterior wall was painted red. My freaking shop was a tan color, so this was a giant eyesore. No amount of scrubbing could get that crap off. I got most of it, but it was certain to be noticed. So I decided that the only thing to do was tell my mom. She called that night and I explained the situation. I was sure she was going to be P, and if she wasn't, Frank would be. They both laughed about it. Of course they made me repaint the shop, but no other consequences. Still, when it was happening, I was sure I would get totally killed. A couple of years ago, I got really depressed. Like, shut everything out of my life and don't leave the house for months depressed. I was in school at the time, fully funded by my parents. Of course, I hadn't gone to classes for months, so I was in line to be dismissed from my university. I started ignoring calls from my parents because I couldn't stand the shame of how I was letting them down. I spent most of that time completely crippled by the knowledge that inevitably they were going to learn what I had done and I would need to face that. Of course, they knew where I lived and eventually drove to my town to check on me. That's when I learned that my crippling anxiety of them finding out was very, very irrational. They were disappointed about school, but they didn't even talk to me about it when I first saw them. All that they cared about was that I was suffering the way I had been. They did all they could to bring me back up and support me while I recovered. I will always love them for what they did in that situation. It completely blew away all of my expectations of who my parents were and made me realize just how much they cared about me. This made me happy. Your parents seemed like really awesome people. I'm glad everything worked out. Caught watching naughty stuff. Stole parents' car, hit a truck, got away with it. I was 16 at the time. I grabbed my parents' car keys in the middle of the night, snuck out and took the car for a spin. Went to a buddy's house, picked him up, drove around for a few hours. Nothing big, just enjoying the freedom of driving in the middle of the night. I drop him off and head home. We lived in a condo at the time and as I was pulling into the parking area, I hit a Bronco parked in the next spot. I froze, finished parking the car and jumped out to inspect the damage. Not a single scratch on the Bronco, but the passenger side headlight and headlight bezel bumper cone were damaged. Nothing huge, but the headlamp was loose and pointed down slightly, and the bezel was cracked. I was petrified. I knew I was a dead man walking. I snuck back in the house, put the keys back, and went to my room where I laid there the rest of the night contemplating my fate. The next day we went a few places as a family. Every time I walked past the car I glanced over. knowing the worst was coming. Neither parent said a word. A few days later my parents came home from being out and about, walked in the house. My mom slams down her keys. I give her a nervous look. What's wrong? She looks me dead in the eyes and says someone hit my effing car. Oh crap. You guys okay? It was in the parking lot. We came out and some big butt van was parked so close to us I had to squeeze in. When we pulled up here I looked closer and sure as crap, he hit the front end. Oh man, that sucks. Proceed to go inspect this damage. That's not too bad. Did you get his plate? No. I hope he didn't actually hit the car. I want to go back and find that prick. I went back inside and counted my blessings. Flash forward about 15 years and we are celebrating my daughter's 2nd birthday. I finally confessed to my mother. She wasn't thrilled, but too late now. Can't ground me at this point. I'll put her in a home. Some big butt van was parked so close to us I had to squeeze in. Some big butt van saved your butt. This is divine work right here. I accidentally broke the truck's front window. 12-year-old me thought it would be a good idea to take a hammer and throw it straight at the window. Let's just say I couldn't sit right for a while. Accidentally got my mom stoned once. I had baked up a super huge batch of cookies when they went away. They turned out super strong. I left them in the freezer hidden inside a pogo box I cleared out way at the back. For some unknown reason, my mom looked through the freezer, found the hidden cookies, thought, oh these look good, I'll have a few. Proceeded to eat 3 of them, after thinking these takes a bit weird. As I'm heading out to a friend's place, she walks up to me and asks if I baked some cookies and if there was anything wrong with them as they tasted weird. Just came right out to say it, they were potent weed cookies that lasted a good time. Didn't really say much after that and I pieced right out of there. Heard from my brother when he dropped by to see my mom before his shift that she was like, he said they were strong but I didn't know it was going to be this strong. Thought I was going to get yelled at when I got home, or at least when my dad got home, but nothing actually came of it. I used to have a little bit of a temper issue and, after my running back fumbled the ball 5 times in a single game of Madden, I stood up and punched the wall, thinking it would be a harmless way to get the anger out. As you probably suspect at this point, my hand went through the wall. Sheetrock ain't that sturdy, folks. Neither is the running back if what you said was true. 1.5 years ago I overdosed on opiates and was taken to a hospital and then to ICU. At this point I was awake, but as I had been knocked out for 30 hours, I was severely dehydrated and in pre-stages of kidney failure. I was also told I might lose my right arm and leg. The staff made me call my parents to tell them to drive 80 miles to an intensive care unit because I had fricked up with opiates and my internal organs were shutting down. Can you imagine waiting and thinking what you're going to say? It was easily the worst moment of my life. I still have 4 limbs and kicked benzos, alcohol and opiate since. Glad you're sober now. When I was maybe 12, I ran my grandparents' ATV into a pond on their ranch. It was the only pond on the entire property and I was driving like an idiot to be cool and I had only very recently gotten permission to drive it without an adult. I was sure that I was going to be killed by my grandparents, then brought back to life and killed by my parents. It ended up being one of those they're more glad I wasn't hurt than they're angry at me moments, but I was sweating bullets in the aftermath. Brought home a report card in 10th grade featuring straight Fs. Was not scolded at all. This is when I realized I wasn't a priority to them. Not my biggest. When I was 7 I ate an entire pumpkin pie. I kept going back for one more slice. I couldn't control myself. Funny thing is that my mom wasn't even that mad. She was impressed I could eat it all that quickly since they had only been gone an hour or 2. Got caught by the police while letting out my teenage angst on private property. Got a ride to the station and they called my mom to come pick me up. Then charged and fined for vandalism. Thought I was gonna get to spend my remaining teenage years in juvie. Got my crap together pretty quickly after that though. I used to be a popcorn addict. I ate it all the time when I was a kid. I had recently gotten into the habit of making it on the stove instead of in the microwave. One night when I was getting ready to watch the 1973 Westworld movie for the first time, I made some popcorn and took the pot I made it into the living room and put it down on the carpet in front of the TV. What I didn't realize was that the carpet had plastic fibers in it and it was a huge mistake to put a semi-hot pot directly onto it. Once I managed to pull the pot up from the carpet, I found a burn spot the size of the pot on the carpet. I spent the better part of the night trying to scrub the burn spot away. Of course, all my efforts made no difference at all. Eventually I went upstairs to bed, crying and dreading when I had to face the music in the morning. My mom was mad, but I think she realized it was just an accident. I think she was joking when she asked if I made the burn mark because I was doing a satanic ritual. My sister was probably more angry than she was because we were going to be hosting an exchange student a few months later and she thought it would make us look trashy. We ended up just putting a rug over it and it didn't look too bad. A few years later my mom replaced the carpet when we sold the house. The carpet I burned was pretty ugly in retrospect. I still remember the incident and cringe internally whenever I watch the Westworld movie. When I was about 17, my parents left me alone for about a week. My mom was going through the things she needed done while she was away. She brings me around to a little corner of her garden and shows me her hibiscus. We lived in Colorado, so getting one to bloom was quite a featuring. Sweetheart, this flower is my greatest accomplishment. I've tenderly cared for it for years. I love this flower more than I love you. Whatever state it is in when we get home is the same state I will leave you in. That night we had golf ball-sized hail. Dad ran into my room in the middle of the night to show me his new chainsaw and hockey mask. Damn it, Homer. This was after I had moved back home for a bit after college. I had told my parents I would be out late, which was fine. They didn't really care where I went or what I did as long as I texted before they went to sleep to tell them when I was coming home. I was high when I got home, but it was like 3 AM. I didn't expect anyone to be up, and I was wearing a skirt, which I never wore around my parents because I had 2 tattoos on my leg that they didn't know about. I had I think 5 or 6 tattoos at this time, but they were only aware of one of them. Because when Dad found out right after I got it, he didn't speak to me for 2 days. I didn't really want to repeat that, so I just never told them about any of the others. So I came home stoned, walked into the kitchen to grab a drink before going to bed, got over to the cabinet for a cup, and then realized my dad, who, by the way, is a retired cop, was behind me. So I had to talk with him for a bit. Not a "where were you" interrogation, just catching up and chatting. But I kept turning at weird angles so he could never see the tattoos on my left leg. He was moving around the kitchen, like grabbing a cup from the cabinet and then crossing over to the fridge etc. And I was constantly shifting to try to keep my left leg away from him. Eventually I was like, well, okay, I'm gonna go to bed, and then I walked out of the room backwards. I was sure I was gonna get in trouble the next day, but he never mentioned it. Dad discovered my stash of whiskey, proceed to lecture me for not sharing. Accidentally shot the TV with a BB gun. Big ole 15 centimeters wide deadline down the middle of that thing. My question is how you managed to convince people that was an accident. I asked my dad if I could go out with my friends. He said no. So I snuck out anyway and took the car. I had a driver's license. Then I crashed the car. Had to call him and ask him to come pick me up. My parents bought me a car before I had a license. I would drive it to the store just a couple of miles from home. My dad always said that if I was stopped by the police, he didn't know my daughter took the car without a license. Anyway, my parents are out for the evening. My friend and I decided to go to the store to pick up snacks. On the way there, a traffic police unit was parked on the side of the road. On the way back home, I decided to take the back roads to avoid the cop. I didn't know there was a new stop sign installed at an intersection and blew through it. There was a cop waiting there. He pulled me over and I hyperventilated, more worried about my parents than the cop. After giving him all of my information and having family members come pick up my friend and me, we get home and freaked out the entire time until my parents got home. They sat me at the dinner table and then busted out laughing. Parents grounded me for a week, but I was not expecting them to be laughing. I was waiting for some yelling or whatever. When I woke up the morning after my graduation party, not having remembered a thing past 20 minutes into the party, everyone including the people who came from out of town for my graduation was sleeping and I was confused as to what happened. followed by the craziest next few days ever. Apparently I drank too much because someone told me to chug a bottle. I threw up on a kid with cancer, threw up elsewhere and ended up in the bathroom until my dad picked me up to go home. My reaction to I threw up on a kid with cancer makes me hope there is no such thing as instant karma. Report cards were coming in the mail while we on a family vacation. Texted a friend asking him to go to my house and grab it out of the mailbox. Accidentally sent it to dad. How are you still alive? My dad worked for the State Department and used to bring animals home if it was too late to get them over to a nature center. When I was 5, he brought home a baby skunk. My dad was told by co-worker that it was too young to spray and just to keep it in a box overnight and bring it over in the morning. He didn't take into account that he had a 5-year-old daughter that was obsessed with kittens. After my parents went to bed, I got up to investigate that box. Sure enough, there was a little black and white kitten. I pulled it out of the box to play with it when it took off running and hid under some furniture. I was so worried my parents were going to wake up and found out that I got the kitten out when I wasn't supposed to, so I found a broomstick and tried coax the little beast out from underneath the china cabinet when it sprayed me directly in the face. Then continued to spray. The smell was so bad it not only woke my parents up but it woke up the neighbors as well. They were able to get the skunk back in the box and then we had to evacuate the home, leaving the windows open to air out the place. The neighboring apartments had to evacuate as well. They rushed me over to my grandmother's home and gave me a tomato juice bath. Yeah, my parents were pee. When I was 12, my dad brought home a dove. Similar situation. He was planning on taking it over to nature station but it was too late at night. He put it in a laundry basket and put a blanket and a piece of wood over the top. He specifically said, "Make sure to keep my cat in the room with me that night." I was playing my SNES and didn't realize the door was cracked. That's when I noticed that Kitty had slipped out of the room. I dashed out to find him. I got there just in time to see him swipe at the bird in the basket. I saw the bird fall back so I grabbed Kitty and ran back to my room. I didn't realize that the bird's head was in my cat's claws until I set him down. I rushed back out to the kitchen and walked in on a murder scene. There was blood everywhere. It was skirting out of the headless bird's body. I broke down in tears, but I didn't want to wake my parents, so I just cleaned everything up. Then I grabbed the bird's leftover parts and buried them out in the woods behind the house. I then hid the blanket in my room so I could sneak it into the laundry when my parents weren't looking. When they woke up the next morning, there was no bird. I told them that it had died and I took care of the body for them since I was worried it would make them sad. I finally confessed up to that one last year, only 21 years later. Haha. The irony is that that cat got sick and passed away several years after that, and my parents found a quaint place in the backyard so we can bury him. That place was almost exactly where I hid the bird carcass. I mean, I feel like the skunk thing is on your dad. Imagine trying to explain to your wife that it was too young to spray while your apartment block is being freaking evacuated. When I was 17, one of my friends decided to down several bottles of red wine at a party. She couldn't even walk. Since I lived closest, I called my dad, and he came and got us. Totally tested out the "if you or your friends are in trouble I'll come get you no questions asked" thing he's always told me. There's no way we can put her on a bus in her condition. We get her into the car, with several other friends holding her upright in the back seat. It's all going okay. About 3 miles in, the inevitable happens. The red wine comes up, everywhere, all over my dad's really nice car that he loves. Red wine vomit all over the back seat. We pull over and she finishes hurling in the gutter. He stops at a gas station, grabs paper towels and mops her up. We get her home. This is the part where I figure I'm going to hear it. I've created a situation where my dad's car is basically a dripping red puke-mobile. We drive home while I basically apologize every way I know how. He stays calm, but my dad had that calm angry thing, you know? So I still have no idea. I tell him I'll stay up and clean it as best I can, and then pay to have it cleaned ASAP. He tells me to go to bed. What's done is done and we will get it in the morning. When I got up that morning the car was gone. He had called a buddy that did detailing and taken it straight over there. He never asked my friend or I for a dime. And I know it cost a lot to get that car back to a point where you could sit in there and not smell puke. He told me he had been glad I had called when we were in trouble instead of trying to handle it. Now I have a nearly 17-year-old, I get it. But at the time I had no idea how much it means to know your kid and her friends are okay. AWW, I had a similar story. I was at a party in the summer after I graduated and my dad knew I was drinking, but my friend got puking blackout drunk and her parents didn't know what she was up to. I called him and he picked us up and helped me get her upstairs and got a new shirt for her water, and she spent the night at mine. Dads are the best. My dad is big into history and stuff, so he has a very large collection of antique guns in our basement. One day when I was super young, probably like 7 or 8 maybe, I was playing in the basement and running around holding one end of a jump rope. The other end was dragging on the floor and got stuck under the butt of one of the guns. I could see the look of horror on Dad's face as he realized what was happening, running over to try and stop them, but to no avail. Probably like 15-20 antique guns fell over like dominoes. To this day, I don't think I've ever seen my father angrier. He did have his friend make him some gun racks shortly after this incident. I take it they were your friends after the incident too. I crashed the family car. Story time. When I accidentally knocked over a gallon of white paint on the front walkway, it made a mess of the bricks and mortar, getting into the nooks and crannies. The plan to surprise Dad by repainting the overhang and trim while he was away really backfired. At least you were trying to do something good, and not doing something you weren't supposed to, like in so many other comments. It happened a few years ago. I was driving home late at night and saw a friend walking home. I stopped by and told him to get in. He said it's okay, but I invited him once more. He came in and off we went. 5 minutes later a car shows up in the rear view mirror. It gets closer and flashes the lights. It was the police, wanting us to stop. Traffic stop apparently, but the car was undercover type. A woman shows up and wants the ID, license, etc. She was cute but not that much for long. Then she wants me to open the trunk and show the mandatory equipment. She asks if she can examine the inside of the car. I refuse as they need a warrant for that. My friend was visibly getting nervous. Her co-worker then comes and they strip search us and he finds drugs on my friend, an amount that easily got him suspected of being a distributor. I got a bit dizzy and felt like in a nightmare. I feel and hear handcuffs zipping behind me. Wasn't really hearing what she was telling me, but the next thing I know we are sitting in their car. My friend got kicked out by his parents a week before and he lived with grandmother who was financially struggling and getting evicted. He got hooked by a gang and sold drugs after his job and got some quick money to prevent eviction. His parents gave 0 shoots. Cops had the gang on the radar for quite some time and saw me pick him up. I ended up only getting detained as they didn't find anything inside the car and he also took all responsibility. TLDR. Friend has a bunch of drugs in my car. We get stopped by undercover police car. My parents would flip their crap if I was arrested due to connection with drugs. When I stole my mom's car to avoid going to church. Breaking 2 commandments for the price of 1. I like it. My childhood home had a large pond in the backyard that my parents used to farm fish for selling. One weekend when they were out of town I invited a friend over to hang out. We ended up going fishing and had so much fun doing catch and release we grew an appetite. My friend claimed to have the greatest fish fry recipe ever and we ate a large amount of fish from the pond. It wouldn't have been real noticeable if the entire house didn't still smell like the inside of a fry kitchen as my parents came home and pretty much figured it out. Not the slightest bit happy about that. When I was in a parking lot the other day just jetting off to leave, some buttholes backed into my car. The lady was looking straight at me as she did it, so I know she did it on purpose. I thought oh frick, and then I said oh crap as I realized I was in my parents' brand new BMW that I was borrowing while my car was in the shop. Lady was awfully rude and tried to get me to fight her and called me names. Lo and behold, she didn't have insurance. Parents loved that phone call for sure. When I had to call 911 because I set my entire field on fire while my parents were at work. Don't play with matches, kids. I'm in high school, it's 2 AM, and I have been smoking the ganj with my friend in his car. He drops me off at home, and I start tiptoeing through the house to my bedroom while holding my bong, assuming my parents are asleep upstairs as usual. When I reach the stairwell, the lights suddenly go on and I hear my mom's voice. Busenfreund, is that you? She's at the top of the circular staircase looking down at me, and I'm doing the classic hold the bong behind your back routine. She starts talking about how I scared her, and how I should have gotten home earlier. I'm super high, super paranoid, completely startled, and my heart's pounding. I have no idea what I said. I just remember trying to maintain the conversation without giving her any reason to come downstairs. After a couple minutes she says goodnight and turns off the light, and I feel like a lucky sonophobic. Woke up hungover on someone's couch with 35 missed calls, a missing persons report and a wicked headache. When I was in college, my parents bought me a plane ticket home to visit. I arrive at the airport at 12:30 for a 2:30 flight. I go to check in, and they tell me the flight has already left. I'd misread the ticket. It was a 12:30 flight. I thought I'd have to buy a new ticket and panicked. Turns out I could either fly standby for no extra charge or get a seat on the next flight for just $40 more. My dad was still mad he had to pick me up at the airport at midnight, but could have been way worse. When I fell asleep while driving cause I did too much and crashed into my neighbor's car. Dang, I hope you're doing better, man. My parents got a bill for an ambulance ride that I took in college. One night I took 16 shots in 1 hour. Yes, really, it was part of a dumb competition thing and we were keeping tally, and about 2 hours later my friends called an ambulance because I was pretty much unresponsive. Anyway, my parents got the bill and asked what it was for, and I panicked and said it was private. So I ended up paying for it and they still don't know to this day. I'll probably tell them for fun sometime now that I'm older. For college kids reading, hopefully you're smarter than I was and you already know binge drinking isn't cool. It's cool they respected your privacy though. I once missed 8 calls from my mom. I'm sure you're replying from heaven. Played with the lit incense stick as a kid at home. Thought I snuffed it out, not realizing an ember got into my blanket. Bedroom almost caught on fire. Got a just butt whooping after. You have been visited by the wealth rat. Subscribe in 12 seconds and he will share his wealth with you. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.